Hello, I thought I would to try and relate in this video an account of this guy called John Thomas Gilbert, one of the great Dublin historians, probably the greatest historian of Dublin. A huge amount of the great 19th century texts of our Irish historical sources were printed by this guy. And anyway, there's just an interesting story relating to John Thomas Gilbert that I thought might be worth a video. But what happened was he combined with the Ordnance Survey in England about 1879, and you can see the photography building of the Ordnance Survey of England there. And they combined to produce a kind of an 1879 colour photocopier. Believe it or not, I know it sounds incredible. So he went around Ireland and England to some of the great repositories of the manuscripts of Ireland, and in that he took, if you like, a colour photocopy of these manuscripts. And I just thought it might be curious to see some of these manuscripts in the flesh. So here we are. This is from a manuscript, picture of Columkill, for a manuscript on Columkill for Manus O'Donnell of about 1532. Of course, the O'Donnell family of Donegal are very famous for holding a great relic of St. Columkill known as the Cock, and that's described at length in this great book by Gilbert, this kind of book of photocopies from 1879. And here is the annals of Dúald MacFurbish for the 8th and 9th centuries. If you look at the date there, you got 677 AD, and that's sort of an historical account then relating to that period. Dúald MacFurbish is one of the great historians of about 1660-ish, and he preserved a lot of manuscripts and wrote a lot on annals and genealogical tracts until he got stabbed by a Carmelian soldier. And that was the end of him. And here we have a 1315 deed to the Butler family from Edward III. As you can see in his kind of 1879 colour photocopier, he managed to capture the seal very well. So it's wonderful. So again, all of these pictures are taken from John Gilbert's book. It's called the Facsimiles of National Manuscripts of Ireland. That was the resulting work, and it's absolutely amazing work. It's just fantastic. As I say, these kind of colour photocopies that he was able to get for 1879. So coming on now, you get a page from the Memoranda Rolls from 1325, and it's an account of the exchange of prisoners. Now, to clarify again, this is 1879 that Gilbert is working. In Ireland, we got a huge, disastrous fire of the Irish historical records, which occurred in 1922. So these records, these memoranda rolls, are all destroyed. The originals are gone. So this kind of photocopy of a page of the rolls is all you're ever going to see. Although there are extensive abstracts of these rolls taken for the Irish Manuscript, the Irish Record Commission in about the 1820s, and they're still there in the National Archives of Ireland. So there are extensive texts on these memoranda rolls. As I say, the information that's in them, they're not digitized or published or anything, but they are there, as I say, kind of copies, not full copies, but kind of copies. But the originals are generally all gone. There's, I think, about two Irish Exchequer memoranda rolls still in existence, but that's a minuscule proportion of the total. They were all pretty much all destroyed. And here we get 1337 of the grant of the Palatinate of Tipperary to the Butler family, and a different type of seal. Just to clarify that, because it's a fascinating point. You know, if you look at the great lords of Ireland, they had different types of land ownership. For example, theoretically anyway, if you're an earl, you have an earldom. If you're a baron, you have a barony, etc., etc. Well, the highest of those ranks, if you like, in terms of a parcel of land, if you like, under the control of a native lord as opposed to the king, is a palatinate. And there are very few palatinates in Ireland. There was a palatinate in Meath, owned by Hugh de Lacy, and a palatinate, I believe, south of that, run by Strongbow. But the only palatinate that really survived in Ireland for any length of time was Tipperary, and was given to the Butlers. Now, this is a significant point. You see, it means actually that Tipperary, for about half a millennium, was ruled by the butlers, not by the state. Even they had a kind of a Supreme Court in Tipperary run by the Butler family. It's a fascinating phenomenon. And anyway, here's the original grant of Tipperary to the butlers. And this is just a missal from St. Thomas's Abbey in Dublin that he was able to get a few pages of. And now you have a psalter of Christchurch Cathedral, which is now in the Bodleian. As you can see here, it includes some interesting chant references, and it's very elaborately illustrated. Obviously, Christchurch is a very well-known building in Dublin, and as I say, this psalter is now in the Bodleian. That's the great library for Oxford. It's still in Oxford. You have to go there to have a look at it. And here we see some images, kind of contemporary, of Richard II in Ireland. And this is actually taken from a Harleian manuscript in the British Library. As I say, John Gilbert, when he went around in his 19th century photocopier, he went to some of the big places in England where they had manuscripts as well as Ireland. And here he is turning up in the British Library and taking those images of what's said to be Richard II in Ireland. And you can see there that he's knighting a person, as you saw the first image there, which is the future Henry V. And anyway, then we come on to a sketch of the Court of Exchequer in Dublin. Now, this image is actually really, really important. And the original is gone. It was in the one of the old books of the Irish Exchequer, which went up in the fire in 1922. And this image and another image that I'm going to show you now are the only images we have of it. The original, as I say, is gone. Now, this is actually a person in approximately 1400 AD. He's actually taking a sort of a pen portrait of what's going on in the Irish Court of Exchequer in 1400. So as you can imagine, it's fascinating. If you look at the sketch, as I say, here's an engraving of it. That is, a person actually just drew what he saw in front of him. It's not, if you like, a photocopy like you saw in the previous image. It's from an Irish journal of the mid-19th century. So if you look at the left, you'll see the barons of the Exchequer. They're trying the case, and the case is outlined in front of them to the right. They're the people to trying the case, and it's in front of the Exchequer board, and you'll see a scribe there at the bottom, and you'll see them making out some words even, and those words were looked at by a guy who wrote an article on it, a fellow called John Ferguson, and he was able to ascertain that some of these things are unique to the Irish Exchequer, and it's a very complicated image actually, but very important, absolutely magnificent insight into the workings of the Irish Exchequer. And to clarify this for a minute, obviously the king, when he comes to Ireland, or the king's officials, they want to gather taxes and pay out monies and what have you, and they obviously reconcile all these monies properly in an office known as the Exchequer. But if you disputed the monies you had to pay out, or the monies that were supposed to be paid to you, then they held a little hearing in it in front of the barons of the Exchequer, a kind of a court hearing. But in practice, these kind of court hearings then went into other areas, nothing to do with taxation, because it was just a simple, convenient way of holding a court. So you could have a dispute about, as time went on, virtually anything, and you just hold the dispute in front of the barons of the Exchequer, and that's the origin of the great Irish Court of Exchequer. The Court of Exchequer is traditionally one of the courts of the four courts in Dublin. Now here's the 1460 copy from the Statute Rolls. And there are another series of rolls that went up in smoke in 1922, but we have full sets of the of what's written in the Statute Rolls, and before, I think it's 1596 approximately, the Statute Rolls are all written in Norman French. Actually, because of course the Normans were French. It wasn't written in English, or in this case in Latin. Most of the other stuff would be in Latin. but anyway, this is written in Norman French. So again, we have an example here of what the roll actually looked like, because it's all destroyed now. And so it's an interesting thing. This is just here a 1567 map of Ireland. Now this image here, 1585, is an example of one of the Irish lords trying to get Queen Elizabeth I to learn Irish. Believe it or not, that's what it's called. It's known as a primer. And it's written by the Baronet Delvin in about 1585. Around that time, he was in the Tower of London, and later on, just in London in general, because he was under arrest because his brother had rebelled, and there's a big story behind it. Anyway, this man's first cousin, Father William Bath, a Jesuit in Spain, later on wrote a huge Latin account on linguistics called Janua Linguarum, which became one of the most influential works of that time in linguistics all across Europe. And so maybe he was influenced by the Baron of Delvin's earlier work on language that you can see here. Incidentally, the original of that manuscript is now in Farmley House in the Phoenix Park in Dublin, which of course is the Taoiseach's offices, and as such it was shown to Queen Elizabeth II when she came to Ireland not so long ago. Now this image here seems to come from the papers of Sir George Karu, who was a leading political military figure in Ireland in the late 16th century, but who took a keen interest in history. And he compiled an enormous collection of documents on history, and he had it there where he lived in Stratford-upon-Avon. He's a key figure in Stratford-upon-Avon. Of course, that's where the actor that they claim is Shakespeare came from. And anyway, here, because it's his handwriting that you'll see on these diagrams. There's 3 diagrams you'll see in a row here, currently in Trinity College. And as I say, I'm taking this from Gilbert's 1879 work. This here is 1597. The English forces are marching up and they're taking a fort on the Blackwater. Now that's 1597, so they did get that fort on the Blackwater. But the problem is that you'll see in the next image is that in 1598 they had to go and resupply the fort on the Blackwater, and then they got they got kind of lost in the drumlins of that area, the Armagh district, and they got beaten in the Battle of the Yellow Ford by Hugh O'Neill. You can see there, for example, the picture of Armagh City. They're kind of moving from Armagh City to the Blackwater to that fort, but they don't get there because it is one of the greatest defeats that the British Army ever suffered in Ireland. And as I say, the writing that you see is in the handwriting of Sir George Karu. And then you see another image here, 1600. This is the capture of Black Tom Butler. Now, Black Tom Butler is the Earl of Ormond. As such, he's a successor, if you like, to the earlier images you saw of the Butlers, and he would then control, for example, the Palatinate of Tipperary. He was captured by a ruse, it was said, by one of the Moors who had rebelled at that time in Laois, and this is the borders of Kilkenny and Laois. Now, this next image highlights a curious feature of the British government in Ireland. I mean, obviously, in some shape or form, the English government in Ireland had control of at least part of Ireland from about 1180 to 1922, or whatever way you want to date that. Or of course they still have control of a part of Ireland. But anyway, the curious thing about it is that the Irish language, for the vast majority of that time, is completely absent from state papers, etc., etc. From official government documents, the Irish language is just, not there. And yet, for long periods of that time, the vast majority of Irish people are speaking Irish. So it's kind of the dog that doesn't bark. When you read in state papers, I mean, it's a curious phenomenon that it's all about Ireland, but absolutely nothing is ever the Irish language. But this is the exception. Oddly enough, it's an Irish letter that was intercepted, I think, in Louvain by an Irish poet called Bonaventure O'Hussey. He's writing in 1605 in Louvain to Father Robert, who was for a long time the head of the Jesuits in Ireland. And this letter was intercepted, and as I say, it is in Gaelic. He was a Gaelic poet anyway, Father Bonaventure O'Hussey. So it's just interesting to see the Irish script of that particular time, 1605 and what have you. Now, here are the funeral arms of the Earl of Kildare of 1612. Now, the interesting thing, another series of documents, the last series of documents, by the way, are the Irish State Papers, and you would have got that in London, in the Public Record Office, now the National Archives in London. It's a very, very important series of documents that all historians are very familiar with. But here in 1612, the series of documents are the funeral entries in what used to be called the Ulster King of Arms office. So in the mid-16th century, the Irish state set up a kind of a herald's office for Ireland. In other words, an official who had to control and who was officially the Earl of so and so, and who was the Baron of so and so, where you would get arms if you wanted them, and all the rest of it. That's the official Irish office. And one of the important things that they did is they recorded funeral entries, a bit like the RIP.ie of the day, if you want to put it like that. And they're very interesting and very important. And some of them are elaborately illustrated, including this one. Now, what you're looking at here then are, if you like, the standards and the helmet that would have been worn in the funeral procession of the Earl of Kildare. Of course, the Earl of Kildare needs no introduction to people who know Irish history. That's another of the really great families of Ireland, along with the Butlers, to whom they were rivals. This is the Fitzgeralds, obviously. So this is the Earl of Kildare, who died in 1612. I just thought you might like to look at this. This is just a letters patent from 1616 to Sir George Moore of Mellifont. So a lot of the time when people own land, they had official documents from the king, if you like, guaranteeing their ownership of the land, known as letters patent. You can also get letters patent for things like charters for towns and cities and numerous other things. But here we have just a letters patent to this Sir George Moore. And as you can see, some of them, especially I think for the early years of James I, are elaborately illustrated. So it's a curious thing there. Now, the next image is, of course, a tremendously important document for Irish history. It's a few pages from the Annals of the Four Masters. And the Annals of the Four Masters were an attempt in the early 17th century to sort of take a sort of an overall compilation of the various annals that were still surviving around Ireland. So you had a guy called Micheál Ó Cleric. He's the key figure. He became a lay brother in the Franciscan order, and the Franciscans in Louvain encouraged him to go back to Ireland and to go around the whole country and see can he get copies of these ancient Irish annals and put a sort of an overall compilation together of whatever annals are existing. And they worked that for many years, particularly in Donegal Abbey, in Donegal obviously, and came up with this finished document, which is known as the Annals of the Four Masters, and is one of the absolutely key great documents of Irish history. You can see his signature there at the bottom there if you look at Micheál Ó Cleric. This next document is just a curious thing. It's in the 1640s, the Irish set up their own kind of parliament called the Confederation of Kenny. They were stuck. They were sort of between a rock and a hard place. The government kind of turned their back at them. And so a number of key figures put their heads together, including, I think, the head of the Jesuits in Ireland and the Archbishop of Armagh at the time, Hugh O'Reilly, and a number of other key people. And they decided to set up the first sort of native Irish parliament in modern times, the Confederation of Kilkenny. Now, it did a lot of ups and downs, and unfortunately, it kind of disintegrated. But at this moment, what's happening is that you have a peace agreement between the Confederation of Kilkenny and the Marquess of Ormond, who represented the king in Ireland. They were sort of coming together prior to sort of Cromwell coming across to sort of put up a sort of a unified Irish front to challenge Cromwell. It didn't really work very well, but in theory that was the idea. When that happened, the Confederation seemed to have compiled a kind of a congratulatory address in Latin to the Marquess of Ormond, and that's what you're looking at there, elaborately illustrated. And again, peace is the theme of it and what have you. And this next image is the image of an historical account and a contemporary historical account of that whole period by a fellow called Father Patrick Hackett, OP, because he was a Dominican. And he kept a diary of the time, and he wrote then a very elaborate history of the time. And the history is known as the Aphorismical Discovery of Treasonable Faction. Now, if you have some difficulty pronouncing that, okay, that's the real title. It's the Aphorismical Discovery of Treasonable Faction. It's an aphorismical discovery because he puts an aphorism at the beginning of every chapter, just kind of a few lines of kind of poetry. to begin his chapter, and it's a discovery of treasonable faction, because his overall thesis is that the Irish were undone because so many of their key leaders were secretly in league with the enemy. He describes, if you like, if you want to put it like that, as sort of a 17th century conspiracy theory. But that was his insight, anyway, into politics of the time, that you couldn't underestimate how much skullduggery was going on behind the scenes. Anyway, that's a page from his original manuscript. It was in, I think, Trinity College at the time that he's taking this this image, Gilbert. And Gilbert, I think, was later, or maybe earlier, published a copy of that. So you can get a copy of the Aphorism Discovery if you want it that way. So many thanks, and I hope you like this scroll through the great work, Gilbert's Facsimiles of National Manuscripts of Ireland. Many thanks.